Do those cheap foam panels actually help your sound, or are they just for aesthetics? That's the question we're going to be answering in today's video. ArrowZoom was kind enough to send me a box of foam diffusion panels for testing. If I understand correctly, their diffusion panels are designed to absorb some sound and diffuse some. So we're going to open these up and take a look at, first of all, what they look like. Are they aesthetically pleasing? And then more importantly, do they actually help with sound quality? Do they absorb those unwanted frequencies, or are they just for aesthetics? It says to open with care, so I guess I'll take them seriously. They definitely didn't spare tape. Alright, these are the foam diffusion panels wrapped up in foam. There's supposed to be 12 in here. Let's see. Well, there are indeed 12 of them. They are thinner than I thought, I must say. Maybe they will expand when I open the package, but I'm afraid that that's as thick as they are. Alright, here we have a diffusion panel, and unfortunately, they are only this thick. Now, a diffusion panel is different than an acoustic panel. A diffusion panel is designed for diffusing sound, not just absorbing it all. So the idea is that where these slots are, the sound that enters those slots gets absorbed in this acoustic panel behind. But then where we have the wood, it gets reflected back and kind of diffused throughout the room. So diffusion panels do have a different purpose than acoustic panels. Instead of just absorbing all the problem frequencies, they're supposed to scatter them throughout the room instead, which these things might do. It's hard to say for sure. The thing that I'm worried about is that the absorption part of it is just so thin. I don't know if it will actually even absorb those frequencies or if they'll just go through, bounce off the wall, and still become problematic. They do look neat though. I have to admit, I love the aesthetic. They're kind of a honeycomb shape, I guess a six-sided honeycomb. And the wood, I think they look kind of clean and professional. They definitely look cool. Whether or not they diffuse the sound at all remains to be seen. It turns out that they're sticky on the back. This paper removes and the whole back is covered in some sort of stickiness. I could probably just stick these directly on my wall. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to permanently mount them yet until I know what good they actually do. So let's go try to find a way to mount these things, and then we can see if they actually diffuse the unwanted frequencies or if they just look cool. I got them all laid out in the pattern that I wanted. Then I flipped them all upside down and prepared to fasten them together. I measured and cut a piece of cardboard that would make some good backing. ArrowZoom was kind enough to send along some double-sided 3M tape, so I put a strip of this tape down each of the rows of the diffusion panels. I then placed the piece of cardboard on top to hold the whole thing together. I decided to do a test in a room with horrible acoustics. The worst room in my house is my bathroom, so I decided to use that room for this test. I wanted to test these diffusion panels in two ways. First, in a sort of objective way, and then second, in a more scientific way. To test them more scientifically, I decided to use open sound meter to actually measure the change in frequency in the room when the diffusion panels were installed. Open sound meter essentially lets you play some pink noise over a speaker and use a measurement microphone to pick up the sound. It will then show you a graph in real time of exactly what that measurement microphone is picking up. So I took a measurement with the diffusion panels installed and then another one without the diffusion panels installed, and we can compare the difference. Before we do that though, here's a quick objective test. I'm just using my measurement microphone and just speaking in the room. Here we go. This is the sound with the diffusion panels. This is the sound without the diffusion panels. And it sounds to me, just talking from here, like there is at least a small difference. When I was talking there in the bathroom, I could hear a small difference in the sound of the room with the diffusion panels versus without. Listening back to it now here in my headphones, the difference is very small. It's there, but it's not huge. Based on this, these things are not going to save the day for your room. Let's see what the more scientific test shows. Here's open sound meter, and this top graph shows what the measurement microphone is picking up in the room with the diffusion panels, and now here without the diffusion panels. Here again, the differences are subtle. Yes, there is a tiny change in the frequency response of the room with the diffusion panels, but you can see that some of those peaks and those troughs in the frequency response don't really change. There's a slight variation, but it's not huge. The idea behind diffusion panels is to diffuse that buildup of frequencies in the room so that you don't have those frequency problems. And you can see that these panels do very little of that. So, what do I think? Do they help? Yes, they help a little bit. In the objective test, there's a small difference. So, having them is better than nothing, probably. But if you really want to change the acoustics of your room, then I would suggest going with some thick acoustic panels. Minimum of 2, more like 3, 4, or 5 inches thick is really going to take care of some of those built-up frequencies. And then if you're going to add diffusion, which can certainly be a good thing, get some diffusion panels that have a little more depth to them as well. They do look really neat though. Get them for the looks. They're going to do a little bit to help with your sound, and depending on what aesthetic you're going for, they can look awesome.